Hey guys, welcome to the Shambles United podcast. This is your host, Karan Advani, and today we're joined by um, two ex-panelists, Kaustubh Pandey and Casey, along with a special guest that we've managed to get on very short notice, in fact, Raul Ghazi, who happens to have had the experience of being a steward at the recent Euro 2020 final. So speaking of the final, what do you guys think about the result? Like, did you feel the result was justified over the course of the tournament, or were England hard done by? Like, we'll start with you, Kostub. Like, what do you think?
I think it was when the tournament sort of started. When Italy played Turkey in their first game, I sort of tweeted this saying that Italy will probably be the most sort of complete team in the tournament in terms of the fact that they could play any sort of system that they want. They can sit deeper, they can have possession of the ball and then press you high up the pitch. They are very good on counter attack. England were sort of at a similar level, but I think at the end of the day, I think the substitutions that Roberto Mancini made, really made a difference because he identified the fact that England were trying to defend deep and um, they were disallowing Italy for having too much space near the back line. So Mancini thought, let's make those changes where Italy then played a narrow front three with the wing backs high and wide, essentially playing a front five. And I think that just changed the game. And um, I think that's how, Southgate just failed to react and make the right changes, which I think is a problem for him. But when you're playing on those fine margins, especially in the international tournaments, which can be very tricky, these are not Champions League games where you've got a couple of legs to make up for the damages in the first leg. You've got just one game, 90 minutes, and the penalty shootout to just win, and you've got the pressure of the whole nation on your shoulders. So it's about playing on those small margins, and England were, to be fair to them, very good in that. But in the final, they just fell short when it comes to making the right substitutions at the right time. But to be fair, I thought England had a better squad than Italy. But as I said, at the end of the day, Mancini probably managed his squad in a much, much better way because you could see England having Sancho, Rashford, Grealish, Phil Ford, and all these sorts of players on the bench. And Italy had Alessandro Florenzi, they had Bernardeschi, and these are two players whose careers are sort of stalling now. So I think it's big credit to Mancini that the way he changed the game and they went on to win. So I think, yeah, Italy deserves the win.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel Mancini's had like a phenomenal impact on the squad, and you mentioned England not making the right substitutions. And Casey, coming to you, like, what do you think about how England approached the game? They definitely started off on the front foot. They got the goal with a beautiful finish from Luke Shaw, one of our boys, and they seem to be looking upwards. And for a while, we started to think that it might actually come home for England this time around. So, what do you think? You feel Southgate might got his in-game tactics wrong by sitting back after the first goal, or was he right to be a little conservative and try to hold out for the result?
See, Karan, essentially the point is that you're talking about a manager that has very limited experience at this level and against someone who's had way more years when you talk about management experience, and that also plays at the back of mind, right? You've seen it with Ole, relatively new to management, and the nerves of such a big game, especially when you consider that it's been about 50 odd years since you last won international tournament, and the entire world, or at least half the world, that is supporting England to want to win it, is basically looking at you. Their all eyes are on you. Essentially, that is obviously a major amount of pressure for anyone even the most experienced people crack under that kind of pressure. And you're talking about Southgate, who's kind of made a lot of mistakes over, on his way to the finals as well. But I think, just to answer your question in a single point, I'd say it's the second half that kind of let England down, not having to, not having brought on substitutions a little earlier, probably sticking with Mason Mount, even though he's not been in the greatest form or in any sort of form, I'd say. And then, probably at the end, when it's heading to penalties, you're bringing on players that have probably not played more than half an hour of football in the entire knockout stages. That is completely unfair. Like, you can't really expect to throw on a bunch of players that have the capabilities but haven't been given the game time, and then ask them to come and perform at the highest level in the most important, most crucial time, where they might not even know if they have the manager's confidence. So, I think overall, it was something that kind of led up to the finals in terms of not giving enough game time to the likes of Sancho, Rashford, and Grealish. And eventually, that is what I feel cost them the finals at the penultimate stage. That's what I feel. It's not just the finals that kind of caused this. It's basically the lack of game time to all the other players in the squad, which I believe added up to what happened there. And probably also, like Kos also mentioned, the substitutions could have come earlier, could have been more critical. But like I said again, experience matters, and having so many nerves probably didn't help either.
Indeed, yeah. I believe at the end of the day, I think it's fair to assume that Mancini's experience and his know-how on how to approach these big games and manage his squad in these tournaments, because we've seen him doing it with the likes of Man City in the past. So I feel that's been the defining factor to Italy winning the Euros. So having said that, like let's come to you, Raul. Like you were definitely the closest to the game of any of us talking over here. What did you think of the game? Did you feel that the emotions got the most of England, or did you feel like were they up for the game? Like, what did you think from inflows?
Yeah, so I was stewarding for all the games at Wembley. So I think most of England's games I was stewarding at, and obviously the final. The atmosphere was amazing. Before the game, there was massive crowds along Wembley Way, and people, obviously hooligans, throwing about beer, glasses, bottles, and all of that. Um, England fans are amazing. They're chanting non-stop throughout the whole game from like 5 p.m. when they're allowed into the stadium till midnight. They're just chanting the whole way through and supporting the team, even if the game is rubbish. And most of the England games, the football wasn't actually that good, but still the fans were creating that atmosphere. So that part was really good. But in terms of how that affected the players, I'm not too sure, because it seemed like the players were up for it, but because of Southgate's tactics and how he wants to play, is the conservative way he's played since the start of the tournament, it's like he's kind of restricting the players, and that's shown in like his formation, his tactics, or in his squad selection. We played five at the back for quite a few of the games when our best players are attacking and in the front of the pitch. So yeah, it felt like Southgate was kind of restricting how well we could have played, and especially in the final. I think after we got that first goal, we let off a bit too much, and against a team like Italy, who are tactically they're a lot better than England, especially Mancini compared to Southgate. It just felt like we were going to get broken down eventually, and we did obviously in the second half. And then once it got to extra time, then you're gambling the game basically, and then penalties came, and then yeah, the atmosphere was still very good during penalties. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Like I've definitely been someone who's been really vocal about uh, Gareth Southgate and the way he approaches the games. Because considering the fact that England have arguably, you could say, the second best attack in Europe, maybe the best, maybe just behind France. It's definitely disappointing to see England play with a five back or two holding midfielders. And yeah, I agree. Like Southgate should have potentially approached the game in a different manner. But like you mentioned, we had a lot of issues before and after the game, because we've seen so many of these videos that were all over Twitter on how hooligans were throwing beer, were assaulting people, assaulting a few cops. I believe a couple of stewards were having a hard time with these ticketless spectators getting into the stadium. Like, did you hear anything inside the stadium? Like, were there any murmurs of how there could be a risk to the players potentially because of these ticketless spectators getting into the stadium?
To be honest, from where I was positioned, so my positioning throughout the whole tournament was basically level 5, so the top level of the stadium where fans sit. I get in quite early, about 4 hours before the game. I have to be in my position, so I only see the fans before the game, on when they're waiting to get into the stadium. So I think right before people were getting in, that's when the problem started, and like, yeah, when people were getting reckless and started messing about. Yeah, and then when I came out, by the time I'd left, everyone was gone and all the damage had been done. It normally takes me about an hour, hour and a half to get home. It took me 4 hours to get home because all the roads are blocked off because of crimes were committed on almost every road. So yeah, that was kind of hard. But yeah, I don't know. There weren't any. We were just told that there's probably going to be a lot of people trying to get in without tickets, and you got to make sure and double check that no one's causing any problems. And obviously, we had a lot of staff on Sunday as well, so yeah, we got to help with that. But from my side, there weren't really many problems. But I know outside the stadium there was a lot of stuff going on. But luckily, I was tucked away from that. I was safe. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really good to know that you were on the better side, like inside the stadium, like you mentioned on level 5. So, like, coming to you, Kaustubh, like, is there something that you would like to add in terms of the events that occurred, especially after the game, in terms of the racism and the hateful abuse that three really young players had to go through? Like, is there something that you'd like to add?
I think for the stuff that happened before the game, I think it negatively impacts England's bid for potentially hosting the 2030 World Cup, because there was talk of England and Ireland combining to maybe make a bid for the 2030 World Cup. And I think the way that thing happened and the stuff that happened, even I think after the Denmark game, I think there was some ugly scenes even at that point. So I think that kind of hurts England's chances of at least not just hosting a World Cup. I think hosting the next Euros or maybe the next Euros. I'm not sure when the next Euros are, because it became almost this negative public spectacle where I remember watching these Hindi news channels in India where even they were sort of showing things like that. And to have the reputation of the whole final and the English fans, I mean, let's not generalize them, but to have that whole reputation destroyed, I mean, at a global platform, I think it does England's chances. I mean, it doesn't favor them in any way. And as far as the racism is concerned, I think it was pretty disgusting. Like, as soon as the game ended, as soon as the penalty shootout ended, I thought I started fearing for all the three of Rashford, Sancho, and Bukayo Saka, because we've seen that even when, especially United, uh, I think when Martial had poor games, people started racially abusing him for absolutely no reason. When I think Axel Tuanzebe made some error, it started again. So it's not like it's happening now. It's been happening over the last 1 year or something. And the weird thing about it is that we're talking about it now. The mainstream media, are all of our journalists on social media and the newspapers only talk about it when something happens. They just wait for it to happen instead of talking about it or writing about it when that issue has died down. It takes a footballer like Marcus Rashford to talk about it when we have journalists to do that job, we have politicians to do the job, but politicians are just there to chase their own clout. Like we saw some of the politicians in the UK seeking, uh, let's say, I mean, I remember someone was saying that Rashford should stick to politics and stuff, and then um, Tyron Mings replied to one of the uh, politicians who works with Boris Johnson. So I mean, it's about taking responsibility as a whole. I mean, Marcus Rashford, whatever he's doing quite a brilliant job. I mean, I've never seen a footballer do anything like it. I mean, I don't think anyone's come any closer to him. I'm just talking about football, not other sports. But one footballer doing it as good as it is, I don't think it's going to have as much impact as um, a community as a whole coming together and focusing it not only when a racism issue occurs, but consistently focusing on it and trying to just uproot the problem as a whole. I know racism will continue to exist till the day we die, till the day we are on our deathbed, but it has to be a community approach from people of all levels. Like the politicians, as I said, they're just for the clout. The media just cover it when something happens. It takes a 23-year-old footballer who once probably, I mean, I remember reading an article at The Athletic that there was a time when Rashford was exiting United training when he was, 17, 18, and it was raining, and his mother was there, and they had no vehicle to go home. This is the sort of character we're talking about. He's such a responsible individual that it takes him to make such an impact, and that just shows where things are going wrong. I mean, it's absolutely massive that Rashford is doing it, and we are, of course, proud of him. But the fact that others don't do it enough, I mean, not just doing it enough. I mean, they're just not doing it consistently when they're only talking about it when things happen, not when I mean they're supposed to do that consistently, and not only when you've got social media retweets, you've got social media likes and all that to go behind when a racism issue occurs. So um, I think a whole community, a whole country needs to come together and just try to eliminate the issue. And I think I remember tweeting this that it's not about the people, it's about the way the people are educated when it comes to racism, because the way people are educated determines the way they express themselves. Like the education systems in place, even in India and even abroad, are very, very, very much, I must say, grade oriented. They are very limited in terms of being moral oriented or values oriented. So I think it's let's say it's a blot on the name of the education systems in place as much as it's a blot on the face of the racist people out there who abuse those three brilliant young footballers.
Yeah, I couldn't agree anymore. Like it's quite clear that the systems in place, the punishments in place, like it's really disgusting to see that people in today's day and age have the access to so many footballers on a direct level. When you look at Instagram DMs, you look at Twitter, you look at tweets, you look at Facebook comments. There's so much direct access to footballers that people consider with like barely any punishments. Like people find it very easy to get to these uh, lovely footballers because we've seen the likes of Rashford, Sterling, Saka, we've seen Henderson, we've seen Maguire, we've seen Calvin Phillips. So many different footballers have tried to take a stand, but until and unless we see a system in place, we see better education, we see better upbringing, there's going to be no way for us to eradicate this problem. So yeah, it's really disheartening to see how much hate the likes of Rashford, Saka, and Sancho have gotten, and they're really young kids. Like I would believe that the three of them are probably younger to all of us on the panel today. It's really disheartening to see a child go through so much of abuse, so much of hate. So what's your take on this, Casey? Like how do you think we're supposed to change this outlook? Like, what needs to be done to get rid of these clowns, that I would call them, on social media?
See, that's exactly the problem right there, right? Essentially we have very strict laws against something like online harassment for individuals. Yet at the same time, when you look at these so-called celebrities, these footballers, right, players that represent their nation, uh, they get, like, they get plummeled with so much hatred online just because they missed something. And like, do people actually believe that it meant more to them than these guys who are actually out there, who have trained, worked their entire lives to make sure that they can compete and represent their country at the highest level, and then missed a very crucial shot? Do I mean where does it even stop? Like, at the end of the day, these guys are probably more disheartened than anyone else. If you guys probably remember, I think it was Shaw, and before Shaw, I don't remember exactly who rushed towards Saka as he missed the penalty, because he was down, he was absolutely devastated. And that's exactly the kind of thing that people kind of forget, that it's not just about the players that win. The players who lose, they are also human at the end of the day. It's a penalty, it's a very, very, what do you call, it's again a game of chance, right? You can't always be sure that you will score no matter what. And that is disgusting. The second thing, like you're saying, how do we go about stopping this? I really don't know if there is an answer to that, unless we have strict laws that come out and say that, okay, people, any side, any type of violence, any type of hate speech, any type of negativity has to be monitored, or maybe strictly taken action against, or you have to be liable for what you say out. Because if you can hold journalists and their tweets accountable as their thoughts, if you can hold politicians accountable for whatever they put out on social media, why can't a normal citizen be held accountable for whatever they post? I mean, to that point, I think I know I'm kind of digressing from the point here, but what India or the government of India suggested with respect to the laws was kind of flawed, yes. But I think at the end of the day, it does a little bit towards helping solve this particular problem that you mentioned about. The other aspect obviously is the upbringing, and you need to, I think, have education which kind of tells people that, okay, this is not okay for you to do. Like, everybody knew that bullying is bad, but people, like, bullies still exist. Same thing goes for cyberbullying and racism at its core. I have, like, it's very difficult to kind of you know answer something where like, especially being in a country where literally every single aspect of your identity can be picked up and used to discriminate you, because that's how our it has been for as long as I can remember. The point is, where does it stop? Like, if your leaders are not beneath using these things as tactics to gain more clout, like you were saying before, who will be the initiator of change? So someone needs to hold this by the scruff of its neck, and basically just take a stand, make sure that, okay, anyone who does it, doesn't matter, even if it's the most powerful person in a particular country, needs to be held accountable, because this is not okay. You have no right to discriminate a human being based on something that they did not choose, based on something that they don't control. That is completely wrong, that is disgusting, that is not human at all. So I think stricter laws, maybe an independent body that can look at all of this, and basically ensuring that people who commit these crimes are tried as actual people who commit the same thing offline. Because let's be quite honest, if there is one thing that the pandemic has taught us, is the fact that there's a very, very thin line between what is offline and what is online. And essentially, it doesn't matter if someone comes and says it to your face or says it to you online, you still are the same person who is receiving that treatment. And at the end of the day, it will affect you the same way, maybe more, in case where you realize that someone you don't even know, you never even heard of, is sitting down and abusing you. So nobody has the right to do that. Essentially, it has to be stopped. There has to be a end put to this, and it can only happen with proper prosecution laws in place, where it's very strict for people to not take it as a joke. Racism is not a joke, abuse is not a joke, discrimination is not a joke by any means. And that is what something that needs to be drilled into the minds of these people who think they are playing around, but they're not.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no way for me to agree anymore. We need to change the systems that are in place, and to give the harshest punishment to these people that are just throwing abuse. Like, speaking of punishment, like, let me come to you, Raul. As a steward, let's just say that you come come across a racist in the crowd. What is the procedure to deal with such a person? Like, obviously they would be thrown out of the stadium, but after being thrown out, what is the next step that is taken? Are they reported to the cops instantly, or are they like reported where they get stadium bans? Like, what is the exact procedure when you come across a racist as a steward? Like, what are you instructed to do?
Yeah, so before every game in the briefing, we were told that there was zero tolerance for hate speech or hate crime or anything like that. So I think the procedure was identify the person, tell the supervisor, then you'll get about 5 or 6 stewards coming in, escorting them out, getting their details, and there'd also be police at the games as well. So yeah, they were very helpful a lot of the time. And then I'm pretty sure they get a stadium ban. It'll be reported to the FA, and I'm pretty sure the police would get involved as well, and on the day, so they'd obviously receive the punishments for that. But I'm not too sure what that is in England for hate speech. But to be honest, there weren't really many cases of hate speech within the stadium. We didn't really have any problems on my level. Yeah, so luckily I didn't have to deal with anything like that. But there's no tolerance at all for any hate speech by the stadium, and they do a pretty good job of cutting it out at games.
Yeah, that's really good to know that you haven't had to deal with such a situation, because being really honest, I hope that no steward ever has to go through a situation where they have a bunch of these morons in the crowd that are just throwing hate at these innocent people for no reason, and potentially vandalizing stadiums when they're being dealt with. Uh, so yeah, it's really interesting to know your perspective on how uh, things work, like on the ground level. So, like, at the end of the day, what are your final thoughts on what's happened after the game? Like, it must have hurt you a lot to see England lose, especially considering they made an international final after 55 years, quite possibly the first of most young people's lives in the UK. So, what are your thoughts on the aftermath after the game?
I'm just surprised that this many people expect any better from England fans. Like, we know what English fans are like the hooligan side of them. Even if we won, there still would have been a problem. But because we lost, they're just looking for a way to take all that anger out. And obviously they've started playing a race card on that, and it's become a whole situation where it's white people versus everyone else now. Yeah, but obviously this time
Yeah,
it's kind of confusing because like there's no common sense involved in the situation at all, because they've from throughout the whole of the tournament, England fans have been booing when the England players take the knee at the start of the game, saying, you know, what's the point? No one really gives a damn. There's no point in the message that they're trying to portray. But when it comes down to it, that they're proving why stuff like that needs to be done. So it's like both sides, that you should know what to expect from England fans, but the England fans, like, they're not showing any common sense. So I don't know. It's a weird situation. That no one's really doing anything smart. No one's making the right move. Because even with all this taking a knee stuff, like, that's not really doing anything. But at the end of the day, if someone's racist, it's because they're brought up like that throughout their whole life. You're not going to change that by just taking a knee and just posting BLM on your post. You got to actually do something with it. I don't think enough people realize that, and that's why the problem is never going to really going to be solved until something big happens. But yeah, it's just one thing that's going to blow over in a few months' time. I don't really think much is going to be done at all. It's just going to be a cycle that keeps on happening.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that it's really difficult to change from the ground up, and like England in general, like the spectators have let their country down as much as the the team has put England on the map as a footballing superpower and like being one of the best in the world. These spectators have really let their country down, and it's going to be really difficult for them to behave in the way they have been, especially at the 22 World Cup, which is in Qatar, which isn't the most liberal place where you're going to be tolerated for hate speech and vandalism, and like there's going to be no tolerance to any form of hate and aggression. So, what do you think about this, Kaustubh? Like, is this are these Euros a testament to how they are going to be expected to behave in further tournaments, and should they be thrown, like, should there be restrictions on them going for further tournaments?
Yeah, I think when the tournament sort of started off, I mean, just after the first game when England played Croatia, Gareth Southgate wrote that article for on Players Tribune saying that they want to sort of, in a way, forge the New England, where the New England, in a way, which um, let's say has different values to what uh, the racism stuff happened, where the Black Lives Matter movement was sort of booed, where them taking a knee was booed. So I think we're back to square one in a way, where instead of moving towards a New England, we're back to essentially where we started, like not just in terms of how the tournament started off, like England were not supposed to win it, not many considered them favorites. They reached the final and lost anyway. So it's a bit like that again, where we're back to square one. We've still got work to do, and things are pretty much quite the same. And England are still the, um, let's say, a heartbreak of a footballing nation. And now they've sort of become this heartbreak of a nation in terms of identity. I think I, I remember reading an article that Mark Thompson wrote and Jonathan Liu wrote about it along the similar lines that I just said, that um, I think Mark Thompson's article said, "What is England?" So in a way, it said that the very identity of England is a big contradiction in itself, where you've got teenage footballers, um, I mean, protesting against racism, taking up their own stands against racism, but the government, the people up above, they barely give a damn. I mean, before the tournament started, I think it was Preeti Patel herself, sorry, who said that um, it's maybe fine for people to boo the players taking a knee. So it's just a big hypocrisy, the very identity of the nation in terms of politics and the way they view stuff. So the tournament at the end just about defined everything. And I think as far as whether the whole actions of the people at the final, whether they should be allowed or not, I think they will be allowed. But I mean, it's about regulating it, because you just can't deny them access to things. And I think when um, these, let's say, anti-social elements get involved, it's usually one of the two. It's either when the fans are absolutely overjoyed, or when the fans are completely disconnected with what's going on. Like when the Super League stuff happened, you saw Old Trafford, and even the Leeds fans, even though they weren't involved in the whole drama, the whole crap that was going on, they still they were still protesting on the streets. Fans entered Old Trafford because they were essentially disconnected. And when you trace back to the whole roots of the hooliganism issue in England, it was because the masses of England, the working classes, they were they felt that the English game was being taken away from their hands. Like when the Premier League, the FA made attempts to make sure that um, the game was not just meant for the local people; it was meant for people like us, people a more global audience. And the people in England, the local people, the working class people of England, the working masses, they thought that they are taking the game away from us, which is pretty much what they've done in a way. So I think it's one of the two. Either they're overjoyed or they are disconnected. So I think it will continue to happen for many years on. I mean, it's the anti-social elements and that are involved in those cases where it starts to go haywire. And in general, I think as Raul said that in general it's pretty decent, as he mentioned that it was only a big section. I mean, by a big section, I mean quite a section of people who did the damage, while others were pretty much peacefully chanting and enjoying the whole scene. So I think since the fact that it happened at Wembley, that's probably why it happened. If it, for example, happened in Rome, or if it happened in, let's say, Baku, where we've had in Baku we had that Chelsea Arsenal Europa League final, we had nothing of that sort going on. But since this was a pretty historic thing going on, um, and England had never literally never reached the final of the Euros in their history, it was the first time that um, they were um, sort of they had come so close to winning a major tournament, and it was happening in London. And the fact that lockdown restrictions just eased, I think it was a combination of three or four factors playing together where it sort of just bubbled over. But I think if, as I said before, it just uh, essentially takes away England's chances of hosting the World Cup, and I think that will teach the fans quite a lot of things where they should keep themselves in check. They shouldn't cross the line. And I just hope that the tournaments, the major tournaments, the Euros, the Confederations Cup, and all these things that take place never really take place in England, or at least at Wembley. So I think, as much as it was a combination of three or four reasons, I think um, it will be a bit of a blot on the name of the whole, the way the whole thing was managed. So I think um, it's better these tournaments don't really take place there for the next maybe 5 6 years at least.
Yeah, I agree. Like the fans really need a reality check on where they stand as a nation, and they really need to understand the consequences of their actions. And the best way to tell them what they did was wrong is to take away any further hosting opportunities, at least for the foreseeable future, and then maybe review it depending on the situation and future events at the in the country. So yeah, Casey, any final thoughts on what's being said over here?
Yeah, I think the only way that seems to be logical to go about it is, whenever a fans of a particular club, they make an issue, they cross the line, it's the club that gets punished so that the club can, take it down and identify the culprits and basically, go ahead and make sure that doesn't happen uh, as much as possible, right? So I think at some level you have to believe that the EFA has to be held accountable for this. They need to be, probably, I don't know, maybe England should lose some rating points. Maybe they should lose their number one ranking. Something that has to have a repercussion on the minds of the people so that they think before attempting something like this. Because I get it, everyone gets mad. When we lost the Europa finals, we were mad. We were disappointed. We all have some level of, um like, we all have different ways to express our feelings, our emotions, because at the end of the day, football is a very emotionally connected game. We feel completely involved as part of the team, right? Nobody can separate the fans from the team. But at some point, you have to hold the fans accountable, or rather the clubs or the countries in this matter accountable for the actions of their fans, so that they make sure that the people that they support, like, you can only be a supporter if you adhere to the guidelines, to the rules, not just being with us in our good times, or being with us in our hard times. These are not the only things that matter, but what also matters is that you are over and above everything else a human being that actually respects all the players, all the effort that's going into the effort, and into the entire process, as well as in general a nice person. Like, I think I can't put it any better way, but you have to make sure. I mean, obviously it's not very easy, but the same way that the FA asks the clubs or holds the clubs accountable for the actions of their supporters, I think it's time FIFA does the same for the FAs.
Yeah, I agree. It's like high time that the regulatory bodies and like the higher ups in the country, whether they're political, whether they're uh, like the FA, or whether they're like the players association, they need to take these steps to ensure that this abuse really stops. And yeah, I think that's a good way to end the episode. Like, any final thoughts from you, Rahul?
In regards to England fans and what should be done.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think this was a wake up call to see what England fans are really like, and I think another thing that no one really talks about is that alcohol. The English fans, they love their beer, so yeah, before the game and during the game, they're just constantly drinking. And if you see the stadium, inside the stadium, there's like a little bar and rest and food court area. There's beer on the floor everywhere. There's cups, and it's all just messy. And yeah, so but before the start of the game, they're already drunk, and they're all like tripping over themselves, taking their shirts off, and just making a fool of themselves, really. Um, but yeah, I think that's something that should be looked into, because a lot of the stuff that they do, I think it's just they're drunk. So I don't think it would have been as bad on Sunday if a lot of them weren't drinking, and probably some of them using drugs and cocaine and stuff like that. Yeah, I think that's something that needs to be looked into by the FA, because they have certain rules. You're not allowed to drink while watching the game. So one of the main parts of my job was stopping people from bringing alcohol into the actual seating area, whereas in the stadium, the parts outside the seating area, you can drink as much as you want, and that caused a lot of problems. So yeah, I think the FA really is looking to the alcohol problem within the England fans, and I think that will sort out a lot of the stuff that goes on. And what happened on Sunday, I think that would have been stopped, or it wouldn't have been as bad.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to make. Like, alcohol definitely brings out the emotions, and like good and bad emotions. It could be a terrible thing to like not regulate. So yeah, the FA definitely needs to look into it. But yeah, I believe that's a good way. That's a good note to end our episode for today. Uh, so yeah, thank you so much, Kaustubh, Casey, and Raul, for joining us for this episode. We will be uploading it maybe let's say tomorrow, mostly on Twitter, and you guys can follow our social media channels on Instagram, on Spotify, on Twitter, because we constantly keep uploading. And yeah, that's all. Goodbye.
Thanks, man. Always a pleasure to be here. See you again on the next pod, hopefully, Karan.
Yeah, man. Thanks a lot for joining, Kaustubh and Raul, especially on such short notice.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thank you guys. Let me know when to come on next. I'll be happy to come on once again whenever you want.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, guys. See you.
Right, bye.
You guys.